Hello, and welcome to our discussion of the first case study in the case bundle number one. The case bundle number one contains four case studies, and all these case studies are related to our discussion of e commerce business models. The case study that we are going to discuss in this session, the title of this case study is The Analysis of E-Business Models for Digital Media Content. In this case study, rather a research paper because it is not really a case study. The target of this research paper is to analyze different e-business models for digital content. The authors of this paper examine different aspects with regard to the management of rights on digital content, the consumption of digital content, and the organization of internal processes and structures. The analysis performed in this research paper is focused on e-business models for digital media content in the German music market. However, the analysis done can be generalized for various music markets around the globe. With regard to the examination of e-business models, this research paper starts with a classification of e-business model based on two criteria. The first criteria is the type of compensation. For example, flat rate or pay per download or usage of digital media content. The second criteria is the dependency on supplier or its technology. The technology is composed of software and hardware. Okay, so here we are going to discuss the four categories of e-business models as described in this particular article. And the first category of the e-business models that we are going to discuss is e-business models based on pay per download and independent of technology of the supplier. Uh, as you can see in the article, this category of e-business model is very similar to the traditional distribution channels. This type of business models offers well-known media content, for example, songs of international music charts. The content offered via these business model is in a data format, for example, WMA or MP3. And one important characteristic of this particular business model is that the content is not restricted to any hardware. The customer often buys not the content but the usage of the content. That means that they actually get the license to download the content. This license to download the content may allow them to download it once or burn it on the CD and so on. That could actually increase the complexity because you will need to administer the licensing. That is, you will need to administer the rights of the digital content that you are distributing through your business. The additional services are not so sophisticated in comparison to other types of business models. And the main goal of these particular business model is to sell the digital content. These types of business models directly compete with the P2P networks and the illegal file sharing. Some of the examples of this particular category of business models are Media Market and Tiscali with music on demand via OD2 and T online. The second category of the e-business models is e-business models based on pay per download and dependent on technology of the supplier. Uh, For these kinds of a business model, the long-term customer relationships are very important. Therefore, the offered digital media content is normally in a format depending on the technology of the supplier. The offered content does not really differ from e-business models of the category A. However, in this particular type of business model, the customers have more freedom to use the digital media content, particularly with regard to the technology of the supplier. These types of business model offer more additional services. For example, personal notes of the artist about the song and the customer's chart list with their favorite songs. Uh, the uh, businesses that utilize this type of business models gain an additional benefit because they can sell their own hardware components because the offer of digital media content advances it. Some of the examples of this category of business model is Apple iTunes and Sony Connect. The third category of e-business models is e-business models based on a flat rate. The primary goal of these business models is to attract consumers, which use P2P networks for illegally copying and sharing of digital media content and uh, have a willingness to pay for it. Uh, for this particular reason, the customers of this particular business model are provided a broad offer of content without any restrictions concerning the usage of the content uh, within the time of the flat rate. The customers only have to pay a low flat rate. The biggest issue of this particular business model is the acquisition of the customers. Therefore, the businesses opting this particular business model uh, generally provide detailed information about the content they offer. In order to advance or to expand this particular business model, these businesses usually provide many additional services. For example, playlist, individual administration of the collected media content, information about the artists, the content, or important events such as concerts and communities. Uh, these particular business models are only attractive for the businesses or the companies, provided that they manage to attract a huge number of customers. If they fail to get a huge number of customers, this particular business model is not really worth it. Some examples of this particular category of e-business model are Napster and Rhapsody. The next category of the business models are e-business models based on commissions. They are also called super distribution models. Uh, this particular category of e-business models actually provide a new idea of selling the digital contents. In this particular type of business models, the customers are both the vendees and the vendors. Uh, they get a low commission if they can sell their acquired content. At the moment, there are quite a few offers with mostly unknown media content. However, one particular advantage of this particular business model is that the customers can use the digital content without any restriction. In future, we expect that the customer's acceptance of this particular business model will be the key success factor for these business models. Uh, some examples of this particular type of a business models are dorfdisco.de and bvision.de. Uh, at the moment, only two or three of the presented e-business models realize profit. The reasons differ, and we cannot say that there are some general reasons that why these business models do not realize profits. For example, One reason could be that the customers are willing to pay for the content or for online computer game, but they are not willing to pay for the content sold through these business models. Beside the digital content, the suppliers also sell hardware, for example, music player, and a profit by a mixed calculation with a positive result is also possible. Uh, in this context, it is actually necessary to analyze to what extent these categories of e-business models are able to fulfill the consumer requirements based on the rights management and the economical conditions of digital content. In this section, we are going to discuss the rights management for digital content. Based on copyright laws, rights define the general and economical utilization of media content. That means, for example, the way of usage, for example, listening or printing, uh, possibility of editing, for example, extracting or multiplying, or the kind of transfer, for example, copying or selling. For companies that provide content, beside media content, the central object of their business is the rights. Before digitalization, the content was an inseparable element of the supporting medium, and the copying and distribution of the process of this particular content was quite expensive, and you could lose the quality of the content as well. The enforcement of rights was supported by the physical medium. In the modern digital world, the copying and the distribution of the content is quite cheap and very easy without any supporting medium but just a computer and the internet. Uh, Consequently, it is now necessary to combine the rights with the digital content to enforce them. There are generally two approaches to enforce the rights of the digital media content. The first approach is called the digital rights management or the DRM. Now, if we go through the article, this article defines digital rights management or DRM as a type of server software to develop to enable secure distribution and, more importantly, to disable the illegal distribution of paid content over the web. Technologies to support this idea of digital rights management include watermarks, rights expression languages, and encryption. The combination of these technologies constitutes digital rights management or DRM systems. A particular or typical DRM system include some of the common functional elements. These elements are: the first element is the access control, which is possibly supported by encryption. The second element is the use control, which could possibly be supported by rights expression languages. The third component or the functional element is the handling of rights violation, which could possibly be supported by the watermarks. And the fourth element is accounting, which could possibly be supported by rights expression languages. Uh, some of the DRM systems provide some of the functional elements. For example, Microsoft Windows Media Rights Manager, Open Intellectual Property Management and Protection, Real Networks Helix DRM, or IBM Electronic Media Management System. So an advanced definition of digital rights management or DRM that actually concentrates on managing copyrights. It states that digital rights management covers the description, identification, trading, protecting, monitoring, and tracking of all forms of usages over both tangible and intangible assets. Uh, Now, if we'll take a closer look at this definition of DRM, this definition includes an examination of the value added processes of the business, with regard to the digital content. Uh, Another approach of enforcing the digital rights management is called the business rights management. Uh, Here, instead of just protecting content, BRM is actually a practical concept that deals with the organizational and especially internal aspects of the rights management. This includes the communication of rights along the value-added processes and the regulation of identifying, utilizing, and administrating rights on media content. Uh, in a nutshell, what we can say is that the BRM is a larger concept that actually includes DRM as well. When we talk about the communication of rights along the value-added processes, what we actually mean is that we want to collaborate with different stakeholders that are involved with the digital content industry. For example, the suppliers of the digital content and the distribution channels of the digital content. So when a company is actually applying the business rights management or the BRM concept to enforce the rights of the digital media content it is selling, it is actually collaborating with all the stakeholders in the digital media content industry in order to enforce the rights of digital content it is selling. The digitalization determines new demands on organizational and internal processes of rights management. Recently, some efforts have been made to analyze the relevant processes and to support them with standardized software, especially the system providers, for example, SAP, IBM, RightsLine, or Jaguar, are actually fueling this development. Uh, Both approaches of rights management, that is the DRM and the BRM, have one intention, that is to commercialize the rights on media content. Uh, the difference is that the BRM or the business rights management examines the internal relevant processes, while DRM or the digital rights management focuses primarily on the enforcement of rights on media content. Presently, media enterprises face a problem that consumers burn CDs or DVDs. They generally do not accept the legal offer but use file sharing tools or the P2P networks to illegally download the digital content, especially songs, movies, or computer games. The customer acceptance is one of the important factors which are critical for the success and survival of the e-business models for digital content that we have just discussed. At the moment, the technology of DRM stands for restrictions with regard to use the digital content for free, what leads to lower customer acceptance. Most of the content providers deploy DRM systems to protect their digital content and their copyrights. Uh, However, the suppliers of e-business models of the category A use technology which controls the access and the usage. After that, they need special support to account the downloaded content. With regard to the access and usage control, these businesses often utilize the Microsoft Windows Media Rights Manager because of its ubiquitous spread or widespread usage. Suppliers of e-business models of the category B use protection technology based on a proprietary development. The customer generally has to install a client software on its computer, which takes the DRM function, such as the access control, the usage control, and the accounting. The customer is not able to deploy another software to use the offer digital content. Uh, in e-business models based on a flat rate, that is category C, the customer can consume the digital content during the validation time of the flat rate. For that, they also need a client software on their computer which must be active during this time of the flat rate. The suppliers only control the access and the usage. The accounting depends on the flat rate and is independent of the usage of the digital content. Note that only the e-business models of the category D do not use any protection technology. This is because the suppliers offer incentives by the opportunity of reselling the digital content. In this context, accounting plays the main role because the commission system is more complex than in e-business models of the category A, B, or C. If you look at the figure 1, it actually explains how this particular commission system works. In order to understand the consumer-based requirements of the digital media content, so that the e-business models that we have just discussed could better shape their content offering for the consumers, it is important that we understand why the customers use the legal digital content and why they use the software such as the P2P networks to download the illegal content. Now, if we look at this article does provides various reasons that why the consumer use the legal digital content. Some of the reasons are better offers, higher quality, and the opportunity to support the favorite artist. Some other reasons are the risk of lawsuits and a distinct personal sense of justice. However, these two reasons, that a risk of lawsuit and some distinct personal sense of justice, is not the strong reason that why the customer use the legal digital content. Further reasons to prefer a legal offer of digital content are that the customers want to buy a genuine collector's passion or buying presents for friends. So that means that I would want to buy a legal content because maybe I want to buy the genuine content, or maybe I am buying this particular content so that I could make a present for my friends. Now, if we come to the reasons why consumers use the P2P software to illegally download the content, there are many reasons that have been given here. Uh, for example, no cost. Of course, when you use a P2P software, there is no cost involved except the charges for the internet service that you will be bearing. The second reason is the possibility of downloading a file to preview the content. For example, I would like to buy a movie, but I would first like to download it so that I could preview the movie before I actually make the purchase. The third reason is the eliminating the necessity of buying a whole CD because of a single song. Maybe I want to buy only a song, but if I am forced that I would need to buy the whole CD in order to get a single song that I prefer, I would rather prefer to download the content illegally and extract the song that I want. The next reason is the convenience. Of course, using the P2P software provides you a lot of convenience because you can use the software to download the content. I mean, whatever content you want to download. The last reason is the unwillingness or resistance to obey to the interests of the media industry. For example, as a customer, I may think that whatever the media industry does is to fulfill their own interest, and they do not care about the interest of the customers. So, uh, if I am downloading the content illegally, I'm actually showing my resistance that I don't want to fulfill the rights of the media industry. Rather, I actually do care about the rights of my own or the rights of the customers. After we have discussed why the consumer would like to utilize the legal digital content, or why the customer would like to illegally download the digital content, it is also important to understand what are some of the features or the characteristics that could increase the attractiveness of the consumption of the digital content. These are the features or the characteristics that would actually influence the consumer to buy the legal digital content. So if you look at the table number 2 of this particular article, It provides us the characteristics or the features. Some of these features are the minimum requirements. That is, a business cannot survive if they do not provide or they do not fulfill these minimum requirements with respect to the digital media content they are selling. On the other hand, there are many features or the characteristics that could actually increase the attractiveness of the digital media content they are selling. And there are also some features that can actually decrease the attractiveness of the content. So for example, some of the minimum requirements of the digital media content is the correctness of the content, the reliable payment transaction, and the privacy protection. A business selling the digital media content cannot survive until unless they fulfill these minimum requirements. Then there are some characteristics of the features of the digital media content that can actually increase the attractiveness of the content. For example, the high data quality, the usability, additional information about the digital content, community features, diverse pricing models, and independence of hardware. These are the characteristics of the features of the content that can actually increase the attractiveness of the content for the consumers. Then there are some features that can actually decrease the attractiveness of the content for the consumers. For example, suggestions about other products of possible interest, compulsory membership in a club or a society, merchandising offers, personalized buying via customer profiles, personalized ownership rights, and the restriction in the number of possible copies. These are the features, if implemented, can decrease the attractiveness of the digital media content for the consumers. Besides consumer-based requirements, the economical requirements and conditions are very important for the survival of the businesses that are adopting the business models for selling the digital media content. In order to gain more success, there are two basic strategies that these businesses can adopt. The first strategy is reducing costs, and the second strategy is increasing revenue. For the strategy of reducing cost, there are certain requirements that a business needs to fulfill. The first requirement is the maximized digitalization of value-added processes. The second requirement is the customer integration in the value-added processes, and the third requirement is the simple cost structure and strict monitoring. For increasing the revenue, some of the requirements that the business model needs to fulfill includes networking and transparency as a valuable consideration. Another requirement is the acceleration and improvement of the product development and the innovation process. The third requirement for increasing the revenue is the searching and creating new utilization and commercialization models of rights on media content. Not only the customization of e-business models is necessary, but also the value added and internal processes should be reorganized and updated on the basis of these requirements and the information about the content provider. The analysis of the e-business models with regard to the economical criteria has the following outcomes. For example, if we talk about the reduction of cost, at the moment the customers can buy digital content via internet and at retail. Another opportunity to reduce cost is the integration of the customers in the value-added processes. Two examples can be identified here. The advisory function via communities or customers playlist, especially in e-business models of the category B or C, and the selling function with regards to the customer's content in e-business models of the category D. The suppliers of digital content do not use these opportunities to full extent, especially those of the e-business models of category A. As an additional service, the offer of the community features and playlist improves the position of the suppliers. When we talk about increasing the revenue, almost every analyzed e-business models has a search function which provides the transparency of its offer of digital content. But if the customer is interested in an offer of unknown artist, he or she will have the difficulties to find this in the whole internet. Sometimes communities could help to find the required content. Only suppliers of e-business models of the categories B and C, which are interested in a long-term customer relationship, offer this possibility. This table actually provides a comparison of various categories of e-business models that have been discussed in this particular article with respect to three things. The first is the rights management, the second is the consumer-based requirements, and the third is the economical requirements. So what we should learn from here is that uh, for example, on the rights management dimension, what different categories of e-business models can accomplish. For example, if you look at this particular table, the category A business models with respect to the rights management, they deploy the DRM technology and they uses ubiquitous system. The category B business models, in order to enforce the rights management, they use protection technology, and this protection technology is based on a proprietary development. In order to enforce the rights management, the category C business models use protection technology, and it is based on proprietary development. The category D business models, in order to enforce the rights management, they offer incentives to enforce the rights and they do not use the production technology. So similarly, we should analyze that how different business models actually differ along the dimensions that have been mentioned here. That is the rights management, the consumer-based requirements, and the economical requirements. These are some of the case questions that we should be able to answer once we have read the whole case study and have analyzed all the different types of the e-business models for the digital media content. So, for example, the first question asked, what kind of e-business models are suitable to manage digital media content? In order to answer this particular question, we need to refer back to the table that we have just discussed. That which particular business model is actually better with respect to all the dimensions that we have discussed. So it is actually very difficult to say that which particular type of e-business model would be suitable to manage the digital media content. It would depend on the choices and the preferences of the businesses themselves. What kind of customer segment they are going to serve, what are the different customer requirements, what are the different economical requirements, and based on these particular requirements, you can decide that which particular e-business model is suitable to manage the digital media content that you are going to sell. The question number 2 asks, what are the key requirements for companies to be successful in the economical utilization of copyrighted media content, especially in the internet? In order to answer this question, we first need to understand the reasons why the customers actually download the illegal digital media content, and then we also need to understand the economical requirements of the e-business model that we have discussed. We have also discussed two strategies, that is reducing cost and increasing revenue. So this particular question should be answered based on these economical requirements of the e-business models and the strategies that we can utilize to achieve these economical requirements. The question number 3 asks, how do the present e-business models fulfill these requirements? Now, once again, in order to answer this particular question, we will need to refer back to the comparison of the e-business models along the dimensions of the rights management and the consumer requirement and the economical requirements.